Once we've entered the assets and defined the tokens for the DSO, what's left to do before implementing each screen is to enter in the DSO the classes corresponding to the typography styles. In this spreadsheet, we had them identified together with the font family tokens and the weight, font size, and color tokens of each one. But this isn't enough. We'll have to go to Figma to copy the CSS properties and replace them as appropriate. Let's start by creating a desktop module, since we didn't do it at the end of the previous video, where it would have been appropriate, in order to place there the DSO that we'll continue to work on. Also, let's create one for tablet and one for phone. Now I'm going to enter one by one the classes corresponding to the typography. Within regions, I start with H1. If I copy the properties from here, it'll only show the typography style. On the other hand, if I copy those of the element in the frame, of course the typography ones and also others will be displayed, such as the color ones, which in this case will be together. So we copy these. In the spreadsheet, I'll hide the columns we're not interested in. Here we see the tokens we need. For example, the font family is primary. The font size is XL. And here we see the color tokens. Since the family is the default, the one we have specified here, we don't need it. We don't need the font style either. With a weight of 900, the desired font is already identified, and here we replace the font size value with the XL token. Next, for the color, we specify this token, which is one of the options as shown in the spreadsheet. The other one, Hero Title, was the right one if we created that token, but we didn't do it. We left it among the optional ones, remember? Okay, I decided to group both H1 and H2 in a title region, so I'd do this. And we would continue with all of them. For example, the menu label, we find it, extract its CSS properties, and copy the typography and color style. In Genexus, we type region and class and paste. We remove these two properties, and we get the two tokens we need. M here, and menu item for the color. We probably won't align the text through the class property, but so as not to have to solve it now, we can leave it like this and solve it later, when we work specifically with the menu. Well, then we would place the ones we already had within regions. Now that a button, I save. Here, this comment is in the wrong place. I'm going to correct them so that they don't cut the regions in the middle. That's better. And the same with this one. Okay. We would repeat this to enter all the classes corresponding to the typography styles. I'll stop in the copyright class because it uses a font family that's not the default one. It'll be the one of our secondary token, and we didn't use a token for the font size, but we left its absolute value, remember? Well, here I find the typography style corresponding to this element here. I extract, as usual, its CSS properties, paste them, copy the typography style and color style, I go to Genexus, paste, and here I replace with the font family token. When doing this, I'm overwriting the font family property that came from the application class, which established that it corresponded to the primary token, remember? I leave the font size in absolute terms. And here I place the color token, which was this one. And now I add all the rest. For example, here I added the classes H1 and H2 of Card Home. Let's see H1 in Figma. If I copy the CSS properties, note these that clearly have to do with the fact that the element was placed inside a frame with auto layout. That is to say, it'll be a flex. And the same will happen with the subtitle. Of course, we don't copy them because we want the class only with the typography and the color. We'll solve the rest when we implement the card in the panel. As for the text transform property, we leave it because it determines that all the text is in capital letters. I also want to discuss the card attraction classes, because there we must pay attention to some things that can be confusing. I had already created the region and the 3 classes that I had identified in the spreadsheet, although when passing them to the DSO, I realized that for consistency, it would be convenient to add attraction to the name of the classes. Let's analyze this H1. What's the confusion here? That we have 3 variations for the font size. These 3 variations come from the other screen sizes, not from the desktop size, for which they were exactly the same for the card in attractions, and for the card in attraction. Let's look at the CSS. The only difference is in these properties, which are not typography ones, so we're not interested in them. The typography and color features are identical. In particular, notice the font size, 36 pixels. Let's copy them. The font family property is the default, so I removed it. I changed the value of the color for the token that I take from the spreadsheet. And now what do I do with the font size? Which of the tokens do I choose? The big one, because it's 36 pixels. For the desktop screen size application, we don't need anything else. We could then move on and not worry about the other screen sizes right now. As we said, we would start with desktop. That's one option, and the one I'd recommend for beginners. The other option is to make some headway. I'll show it with only one of the cases, to introduce another aspect of the classes that we haven't seen yet. Let's see what varies for tablet. Here we have variant 1, variant 2, and variant 3. Here I copied the CSS properties of the 3. First of all, we see that Chechu did not define a typography style for these 2. She did it for the first one. This was clearly a distraction. But the second thing we see in this comparison is that there are only 2 properties that vary. These 2. Everything else is identical. So this variant could be called Card Attraction H1 with the 2 properties that vary, and nothing else. I would call this other one Card Attractions Small H1, also only with the properties that vary. And to this one, which is our default because it's the one we started from, we add an S at the end to differentiate the card in attractions from the card in attraction. For this reason, we have to make this change in our DSO. Let's show it first in the spreadsheet. The names of the classes would be like this. The first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one. We're going to leave the CSS code with the tokens so that later on we can copy it directly. Then we add this S to the name of our class in our DSO for desktop. And we open the DSO for tablet. which, remember, imported tokens and styles from that of desktop. This means that it already has this class as it is, so initially we wouldn't need to redefine it. We could think of adding the H1 class for the small card, copying only these two properties, since before we would include the content of the class card attractions H1. By doing this, it takes all the different properties of these two and adds these two. Although it's intuitive to think that if the class is imported from another DSO, then this is enough for it to be included. This is not so. It has to be in the same DSO. So if we want to use the include rule, we must copy the class. We would write the other class in the same way. Well, we should do the same for phone. Here's what we've already done. The tokens are the same. Of course, that's the point. What I had to modify were these values, which are not tokenized in this case. The same will happen with the typography for location. Let's change the name to call it Card Attractions Location for what will be the default, that is, the one for desktop, which doesn't vary between cards, and the one for tablet and phone, which will have a big and a small version, so we'll call the latter small, while the first one, the default, will be the big one. For the rating, we have the same three variations as for H1, so we differentiate them in the same way. Card attractions for the big version, card attraction small for the small one, and card attraction for the attraction card precisely. And now in the DSO for desktop, we reflect the classes that correspond to them, adding S to the names. Now let's go to Figma. Here's the location. We copy its CSS code, paste it here, and we copy the typography and color properties. We paste them in Genexus. The font family will not be the standard, the default one, but it will be the secondary one. The font size will correspond to this token, and the color will correspond to this other one. And now we do the same with the rating. We copy, we paste, modify. The token is this. We remove this alignment property and place the color token, which is the same as the one of this other class. Now I won't enter this one, nor these two, which would be for tablet and for phone. This is identical to what we saw a little while ago for H1. Here it's already done. For tablet, I added the two classes for location. This one copied exactly from the desktop DSO to be able to use the include rule in this other one, which is the specific one. In this case, the only thing that changes is the font size. And the three classes for rating, the one copied exactly from the DSO for desktop, and the two specific ones, which also vary only in font size. Here's a clarification. I had to modify the value of this token and of this other token, because in the spreadsheet, I had other values that don't match the ones I've just extracted from Figma. I don't know if Chechu changed them somewhere along the way, or if I made a mistake when I created the spreadsheet, but these are the values in the design I have now. Well, that's the DSO for phone. Note that in this case, we don't need a class for the typography of the card attraction rating, because in phone, there was no rating for that card, but simply in attractions. Well, now I would have to enter the properties of the form's typography. that is, those of these two classes. For that, we do what we've been doing since the beginning. And now we only have to enter the banner fonts. H1 and H2. We start with H1. Then we continue with H2, which has the text underlined. This is done with the underlined value in this property. We change the value of the color for the token. Good. Let's check if all the regions are entered. Title, menu, paragraph, button, card home, H1 and H2, card attraction, form, banner, and footer are all there. Perfect.
Bueno, hecho todo esto,
After
ya estaríamos
doing all
listos para
this,
empezar a
we're ready to
desarrollar
start
esto en
developing each
detalle.
screen in
Vamos.
detail.